Welcome back, and you've made it to our final segment of the evening on pivotal change. And we are continuing our discussion with Bob Conn, the former operations manager, to put it simply, in General Motors, who has a lot of international consulting and team development experience as a leader. And we're going to jump right back in, just picking up where we left off in our earlier discussion. And of course, this is my dad. We bear the same last name. So, Dad, you brought something up on the earlier segment called value stream mapping, and how this was utilized by you to create a lot of success driving towards the mission. Could you jump into a little bit more details and break down for us what is value stream mapping?
Yeah, no problem, Ryan. So back in the early 90s, General Motors needed to figure out how to design and engineer product and get it to market quickly and the cycle time. So value stream mapping was a tool that we used to map the existing or the current process. And once we blueprinted the current process, then we were able to use things like constraints management or the 7 phases, Six Sigma, other things that began to say, okay, this is where we're at, this is where we need to get to, and now how are we going to do it and what can we put in place? And so it was mapping the existing system, the process.
So that makes a lot of sense. So we would call something like that in the accounting world workflow processes or workflow mapping. And again, I get why it's different in engineering. So what you're saying is a component to your success was literally taking the time with individuals or a team to break down each of the steps. How do we get from A to Z? Let's literally put this into a map and see where we can find out where we're the most effective or we have efficiencies that are seeping out of the system, and then start identifying the skills of people and putting people and process into the right places. Is that a decent summary?
Right. So bottom line is that you got to design it, you got to source it, you got to procure it, you got to evaluate it, you got to test it, you got to take the data, you got to look back, redesign it again if you need to. All of that takes time. So what we used to take 6 years needed to go to 4 years, needed to go to 3 years, needed to go to 24 months, and then low, because the competition was developing it quicker and quicker. And that was my job, was to streamline the process, take the waste out of the system, put a team in place that could help execute pieces of that value stream.
Ooh, I like that. I really, really like the pieces component of it. I use a lot of language metaphorically saying putting pieces of the puzzle together in order to get the whole picture. And as long as people understand where their piece belongs, then the whole picture can be put complete. Also, you mentioned a little bit about how you were creating influence amongst your teams. And so if we have different pieces of the puzzle and you're assembling team together, how are you allowing those different puzzle pieces or those different team members to influence each other and influence the overall big picture?
Okay, so I'll give you a global picture of that. In China, we were sourcing and building, trying to build a manufacturing transmission plant. South Korea, we were trying to do the same thing. So we were trying to blend experimental engineering builds in a manufacturing environment. The Chinese culture at that time was, we don't understand this re-engineering. And in South Korea, much the same way. So one of the cultural things that we had to break down in order to build the team was, amongst other things, was the understanding that it was good to break something, good to break the part. We evaluate it, we push the part. In the manufacturing world, you don't want your part to be machined or broken. That was an entire mindset that had to be changed in both those environments. And in doing that, we had to spend time together. We had to spend evenings together on video calls. We had to go there and visit, and they had to come here. And so we had to work with all of these intangibles to build trust, because they had to trust me and they had to trust each other. And that is something sometimes you can't value stream map. That's an intangible that you've got to have the tools, whether you're a good introvert or extrovert, or have good spiritual ability to do things, but you got to care about somebody. That's the key. And if they don't think you care about them, then they're not going to want to learn from you.
So that is a huge component. You talk about actually and genuinely caring, not faking it, which unfortunately some people in leadership positions do because they know that's what you're supposed to do. but the genuine care, you start bringing out the emotional, the mental, the spiritual side of things. I think reaching down to a person really to their core level is much more important and valuable than just doing things on a surface level. And you've demonstrated that for me my entire life. And so I remember the results of some of those calls you would have. I remember people speaking French over the phone and on some of the computer calls and not understanding what was happening until I realized that you were literally breaking down invisible barriers to make sure that you had relationships established. And you were working all kinds of crazy hours, which was probably morning time for them, and it was 11 o'clock for us. And the willingness to say, I'm going to go this extra mile to make sure that you understand and you trust me is paramount. And I remember there was a result to that is you had made a comment that says the people and the teams that I'm working with, they're not just buying, into a system. They're feeling like they've bought me, the relationship and the service and the care and the teamwork that I provide. And for me, that was a kind of a hallmark moment where I said, man, I wish I could get somebody to effectively, I'm selling myself. I'm selling me and my service and my relationship, not just some widget that can be marked up for a 30% profit. And I find both a high value in that and a potential danger in that. If your client says, Bob, we feel like we've bought you, and if you ever leave or retire or get promoted or whatever, well, then the whole system will break down. So I'm asking you a two-pronged question. How do you finalize the establishment of that? I feel like I've bought you as a service and you as a relationship, and the two-prong of passing that down to the next person whom you can hopefully elevate to do the job equally or even better than you did to take over that relationship when you move on. Can you address those two prongs?
Boy, you need to ask an easier question. So, when you think about it, and I go back just real quick to value stream mapping, I can map the process. I can put it on a board. I can show everybody op 10 through op 1000 or whatever, and we can see all those things. And the operator piece that you're talking about, or the buying the leadership thing, is that if it's the intangible time that you spend with people. I still have connections with the friends in China, and I still have connections with the people in South Korea. But we have the connections not based on the work and the value stream. We have the connection based on the relationship that we develop with each other. This is because we learned to like one another. That is a key. Many people, you get a job done, but you don't like the person you work for. Well, if you can find somebody that or overcome those obstacles, well, then the work not only becomes pleasurable, then the relationship becomes pleasurable, and then the atmosphere becomes pleasurable, and it's very contagious. And when people see that in a team, and they see that in you, and they see that is what you practice and you preach it and you live it, well, then of course they begin to follow the lead because they begin to believe that that's the norm. That's the behavior. And that takes a lot of intangible work. And you sometimes you can't learn that in a book, Ryan. You can't, you live it, you learn it, you observe it, and I'll give this part, and you pray about it a lot, because it's a gift. Someone said, leaders are born, they're not created. Well, I would say that they're kind of both in many instances. And so you can, because you can, whatever it takes to become a good leader for a long period of time, it's not when the job's finished. This is a key. When the job was finished and we executed our program, we didn't stop being together. We didn't stop being friends. It wasn't superficial. It was very, very meaningful. And that is a key. That is a metric that you use. Do you still stay in touch with these people even when you accomplish the job? Because you never know when you're going to need them again.
Right. Well, and that goes back to the whole establishing the relationship to where we actually learn to work together. We made the job pleasurable. We made relationships pleasurable between each other. Why would you just get promoted or retire or move off and then just leave a bunch of relationships that are intimate to you and pleasurable and provide deeper meaning than just, hey, can we get the job done and get this map reduced in time and increase efficiency? So there's a lot more to it to that. And so I think, you're absolutely right on hitting on all those components. And the statement that you reference is I believe, wholly one of my big quotes that I came up with in a driving forward is that I don't believe that leaders are born, leaders are made. Now, people are born with certain dispositions that make becoming a leader easier, But let's take, for example, like a guy like Elon Musk. There's nobody you can point at and tell me that his natural born disposition was to be a predominant charismatic leader. It's not. He has had to create himself reluctantly into the type of bold leader that he is in order to drive the industry forward. So his disposition was to be more of that background nerd, and now he's one of the foremost personalities in the world. And so I think that sells your point that you were talking about, and I really like that. So let's touch just a little bit on, because you were hinting about it, but I'm gonna see if we can maybe put a little bit more of a detail or just an actual finger on it. Probably our last real brief question of the evening. But if we have clients that are afraid that, Bob, you're going to leave me, you're going to retire, how do you hand off that trusting relation to a person that is newer or less experienced in the relationship? What's the real quick 30-second handoff process?
Yeah, there's no more difficult task than taking the team and the people you care about and then hand them to somebody else and you move on. You have to be able to do that. So the key is transition, transition, transition. You just can't. It's unfair to a team, unfair as a leader, unfair to people to just get up and walk away. When I retired from General Motors, I spent 6 months of training and trying to bring people together and transitioning the team to understand and moving the direction towards somebody else. Because if the focus is always on me, well, then you're going to have a problem. Because when I go away, the team breaks down. A good mentor and a good person understands that you're training these people to be able to step up if something happens to you. But it takes time. You can't do it in a vacuum. So to answer your question, it took me 6 months or more to be able to train, to be able to do that. And that was my focus. You can't find that in a value stream mapping. It's not there. But call it the transition and the handoff. And in a world where people get bought out or quit or all of a sudden go on to different jobs, you can see the disruption not only in the process and the value stream mapping, but in the teams. And those things, they can destroy your morale and your product.
Yeah, that's great. So let me jump in here because I do have to close out the show tonight. But this has been absolutely fantastic. I hope people were writing down the points that you were making and planning out and strategically executing the transition to hand off those relationships. It's not just hey, this guy's going to carry the bag now. And so that's so much more important. What a wonderful discussion, Dad. Thank you. You're obviously one of the dearest, greatest guests to me. But really quick, people are probably impressed with what you had to say, as I have been for the last 40 years of my life. How could somebody reach out and find you and say, I want Bob Conn to help me in my situation and do some of these things he said? What's a way somebody could get a hold of you?
Well, I haven't gone into hiding per se. I'm still on LinkedIn. But bottom line is I think you've included my email and my phone number there. I don't do this consulting business right now. Most of my consulting is in the church where I'm doing it. So, but feel free if people have questions or they're looking for some more information. I always enjoy trying to help people and talking, and I enjoy listening.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much. And to everyone watching, I want to challenge you once again, go out there and see the change and be the change. And we'll see you next time on Pivotal Change.
All right. There you go.
This has been a Now Media Networks feature presentation. All rights reserved.